My name is Barett Steenrod, and why am I here? A little bit about my background that I think will make it clear. I grew up in northwest Illinois in a city called Freeport. It has a population of 26,000, and it's a city that has suffered economic decline since my childhood. Struggles to deliver city services. There's a declining diversification of employment types and industries located in this city. Freeport is not unique in this, but it is my hometown, and for that reason, it's become fairly important to me to address these kinds of problems. And I know that there's hundreds of cities in this country that are in the kind of similar situation as Freeport. Before coming here, before putting together this presentation, I was at the University of Minnesota for the last 3 years doing graduate school in two degrees, landscape architecture and urban and regional planning. And I sought to use my graduate education, that design education, to try and address quality of life and economic vitality in a small city. And through a selection process that was fairly rigorous, arrived at the city of Brainerd. And so for the last year, Brainerd's been on my mind. I've interviewed a lot of people. I've spoken with a lot of professionals, both here and in other places, and have done my level best to try and bring my education to bear in a way that's interesting and relevant and respectful of this community. And tonight I'm going to try and communicate at least the essential parts, if not most of the parts of this of my efforts to you tonight. Any questions about any of that before I go into it? No. Okay. All right, so first of all, we have to get the computer to boot back up. So we're going to try and work through most of this material, and I'm going to do my level best to get through the preliminary parts, which are going to be these parts first, and that way we can spend most of our time on actually the design proposals that I came up with. When I first started this process, I threw myself into the process of design and met with Mark Osgarten back in the spring, and these were my initial boards from that process. There's a lot of things here, but you can see that one of the things that I tried to do is I was working on the downtown. This is East River Road, and this is the railroad that runs through town. And everything that's in color was a massive visioning process, design process that I went through. And it was a lot of fun, and I came up with a really bold vision. You can see some of those elements there that include arboretums and massive facilities, and was really looking forward to the process of trying to really detail these facilities, these spaces. And I realized after my visit with Mark and after talking with some other people and finding some more documents, planning documents from Brainerd, that was a vision that was not at all plausible. It wasn't possible. It wasn't implementable. And it would have been irresponsible of me to try and continue along that track. And so I essentially rebooted, and with the 8 weeks left that I had in my graduate education, reworked a good portion of the project so that it would be implementable, that it would be actually doable, because that was one of my things that was most important to me from the very beginning. Going into it, the entire capstone process, I wanted to leverage design in a way that would foster entrepreneurship and economic growth and improve quality of life. And I didn't want these just to be my own opinions, but I wanted it to be based on something of substance, because that matters. And so what I did is I went through an exhaustive effort to find best principles and practices within cities, within the entrepreneurship field, within urban retail design, and then just talking with actual individuals to try and figure out, well, what are the best things that can be done? What are the things that successful cities are doing to create economic growth, to improve the quality of life? There's thousands of words behind these. These are all different icons that represent a lot of my findings that have application within the project. I'm not going to go into these right now, but within the capstone book that I did produce, that I've handed off to the city. There's an appendix, Mark's holding it up there, that has all of that information that these icons are based on. And so as we go through the presentation, you're going to see these icons turning up at different points. And that's essentially where I'm saying, okay, this thing that I'm proposing, here's the basis for why we're doing that. You know, this worked in another city, or this is what developers do. So that's what this means right here. Within this whole process of design, there was kind of a large format thinking that came out of looking at all these individual practices. And it would be summed up in this way: a long-term strategy for revitalizing a small city depends on having a vision to work towards and creating fast and cheap, quick and easy programs that make use of existing resources. So in a nutshell, in cities where they've been successful revitalizing, where they've been able to create employment and improve quality of life, they've done a couple of things. They've identified their assets, and they've identified their liabilities, and they said, how do we convert these liabilities into assets? And this is tended to be fairly common across the different research areas that I looked at. And so this is a principle that pretty much undergirds most of what I'm going to present to you tonight, is identifying assets and making use of those assets in innovative and creative ways. And so if we look in here in terms of one of the strategies that I've had in mind the whole time is, how do I use design, how do I use planning to actually foster or be a genesis for employment or entrepreneurship? And as I thought about this, it came to me that, well, it's utilizing one of the assets, and that is people. You really need to be able to utilize the people that are in your community, and that includes high school students, college students, and everyone in between up to retirees. And this also includes those residents that are no longer here, those people that grew up in Brainerd but often have an inclination to return in their 30s and 40s with a lot more professional experience. How do you get this resource, how do you get these people involved in the process of building businesses that are successful over the long term, that are taking into account the risk that comes with growth? How do you get them to locate in the central part of the city where you have your history, where you have your diversification of land uses? And then how do you grow those businesses so that they can export into or grow out into other parts of the city? All right, so this undergirded a lot of the thinking that I went through over the last several months. Now, within Brainerd, there have been a number of planning studies, proposals, recommendations over time, and these came up with a lot of bold visions, a lot like my first one, but they didn't necessarily show a roadmap to get to the end result. And so my proposal is going to be different in that I want to make use of existing resources or convert existing liabilities into resources or assets. And we want to do that in a way that's based around programming. Okay, so when I talk about programming, this is going to be pretty essential. If I talk to you about what's the program of a kitchen, it's pretty clear. The kitchen program is to create food, to prepare food, to host family. If your kitchen's not well designed, if you have a really crappy work triangle, that kitchen program's not as effective. If you have a very well-designed kitchen, then your program is supported and you can do more out of that space. That principle applies on a much bigger scale to the spaces within a city, especially Brainerd. And so we're going to be thinking about how do we utilize program to generate entrepreneurship and investment, and how we're going to do that in ways that are innovative and implementable, in ways